Okay, welcome to this council briefing, 16th of April 2025. Review of revenue and financing policy 225-26. So we're going to put that into staff's hands to take us through it. Thank you.
Did you want to start, Sue?
You're on mute, Sue.
Bingo.
Okay. I think Christine was going to start. It was her paper.
Yes, sorry, I think I was on mute. My apologies. Oh, and my video's stopped. Sorry, technically. Here we go. Apologies for that. We're here to continue the process of reviewing step 2 of the revenue and financing policy. You can hear me at the moment, can't you?
Yeah.
All good? Thank you. We're finding this process is just a bit rushed just because of the fact that we need it to be adopted by September. We understand it's a bit frustrating. I don't think you're getting as much information in advance as maybe you'd like to. We're doing our best with the time constraints that we're faced with, though. We went away from the last meeting to look at the composition of the general rate, and found that the roading is the largest, which is 50% of the $22 million that's required from the general rate. So there'll be some conversations around that today. At this point, I think I'll hand over to Bronda now, who will take you through today's information.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Through you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all here on this wet and windy day. And those that couldn't make it online. There's a couple of first slides I'll just jump over because this is really just a reminder of what we're trying to do as part of the process. And step 2 is where we're at the moment. These are some of the questions that we need to consider when we're talking about step 2. And they're a really good understanding of where some of the benefits may lie and the investment in the community that's required. So it's some of the questions that we use to ascertain what we're doing in step 2. So the guidance that we had from councillors so far is the principles from the first review are still agreed by council, which was look at the component of the general rates and understand where the benefits may land, review the roading components of general rates, is what we're also looking for, and CV on general rates to be consulted with the ratepayers. So we're still talking about that, depending on where we land as part of the process. So these are the principles that we decided, or you decided, sorry, previously, and they still stand. So council's considered the CV has more of a connection to wealth and ability to pay than just the LV, as it includes the value improvements on the land. A move to CV will increase rates for those larger commercial properties who pay proportionally small rates on land value. And a review of the differentials would be required as CV has a large swing for commercial and residential properties. So that's part of the work that we're doing today. And then once again, on general rates, this is how the differentials can be set, how the land is used. And just a reminder, that's the usage code, not the property category. So the property category is highest and best use. That's not the codes that we can use. We can use the usage code, which is what we've designed the differential understanding on at the moment, which is the residential lifestyle. That's set based on the summary of the usage codes. We already use one at the moment, which is the land area within the rating unit, and we use that for lifestyle blocks. We've got those that are below 2 hectares at the moment on the general rate with residential, and then those above 2 hectares. Christine, that's correct, isn't it? 2 hectares?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Thank you. Is considered in the other at the moment. And then this is the current differentials that we have at the moment. So residential and small lifestyle. So there you go, there's the 2 hectares. And then other, which is basically everything else. So that includes all the different types of land other than residential and small lifestyle blocks. And that was set back at the beginning on land value primarily because of the roading network and the extent to the roading network is included in the general rate. So that's the historical of where we've sat. And so this is the graph that we showed last time, which is the percentage of what makes up the general rate. So you can see there, roading and footpaths is about 50%. And then the remainder makes up the other 50%. The bit to remember with the water, stormwater and flood protection and drainage, that is the general rate portion only. Quite a bit of it is already targeted and untargeted rates off to the side. So this is deemed to be the general rate portion, which is for the benefit of the full community.
In a way, it's like, sorry, I just jumped in there, but with the roading, you've got the subsidy on top of that amount too, haven't you?
Yes. So this is purely the amount that's in the general rate. So that's how much out of the general rate is split between them.
Now, if you put the subsidy on top of that, that roading would be way through the
Yeah.
roof of that.
Correct. Yeah. So this is, so we're not looking at how the funding's done outside of the general rate. At the moment, all we're looking at is the LVCV move for general rate. The funding for roading sits with the same sort of split that it normally would, which is how much is paid as part of the, the FAR rate, financial assistance rate. This is purely what's in the general rate and what makes up that component. So we went away and did a little bit of a review of where that information sat and what it looked like. And this is a breakdown of the total from the last 24-25 rates. And at the moment, we've used the amount of urban versus rural road to do the split between rural and residential and other. And the reason that we say other is it's majority of those things that would sit normally in the urban space, which is commercial, industrial, all the, utilities, some of which are out in the wide world, but majority of those actually sit within the urban boundaries. And that is the split based on meterage of road and meterage of culverts and an estimation of the other expenses, which we went through with the roading consultants around where that split lies. The remainder of the amount that's in the general rate, we went through and had a look, and all of it really sits across all. It's a benefit to all of the community. And so, stormwater and wastewater and flood protection, like I mentioned, that's the amount that's included in the general rate as benefit to the whole community. Regulatory functions such as building consents, resource consents, that's the whole community's gets benefit from that. Open spaces, cemeteries, etc., and then also the district leadership, which goes across everything as well. And so, looking at that at the moment, if we did the differential, which we'll talk about in a minute, for rural versus residential roading, that comes out at about 4.8 in spend of roading for rural compared to residential based on meterage. Now, the other thing I have asked for, which I haven't yet received, but is the split between actual expenditure, considering how much the urban roads may require more work, especially in sealing, than rural roads. And I'm waiting for that breakdown at the moment, and that might change that percentage to be more urban. And I've tried to take account of that when I've done the differentials, which you'll come and have a look at when we get to it, to take into account that that's got more of a, there'll probably be more of an urban swing when we've done that. So I've actually looked at that at 4 rather than 4.8. So we got any questions on that bit at the moment?
Councillor Vincent.
Yeah, just to clarify, you've got the little tables at the bottom of the page, and that's sort of a measure of quantity infrastructure,
Correct.
whereas up top in the table, you've got it's the dollar value of the infrastructure. So
Correct.
is that the correct relationship? It's showing you that there's a lot more kilometres of unsealed road, surprise, surprise, in rural, but it's sealed and unsealed combined, along with the bridges and culverts and so on, all contribute to the fact that rural roading dollars spent is, 12.3 million.
Yeah.
Really compared with 2.5.
So we went,
Is that right?
so when we went through the different aspects of what makes up the roading spend, along with the roading engineers, we went through and had a look and said how much would pertain to where. So there's sealed, unsealed, network, maintenance, asset management, all of those things. And as an estimation, depending on what it was, we used the kilometres of roads, or an estimation by the engineers as to what that split should be. Some of it was 50-50, because the asset management might be, on rural roads and urban roads, it takes about the same amount of asset management planning, because urban can be a bit more complex. So we went through and did that on each individual piece of the actual makeup of and then added them all together. So some of it's 90-10, I'm just using 90-10, 90% rural, 10% urban. Some of it's 50-50, some of it's 93-7, depending on what the split is for the different types of percentages. So that's how we've gone through and looked at each of the different category of spends and used those percentages as part of that. So it's just not a blanket percentage based on, it's an individual spend percentage that we've then applied to come back to a total of, 12.3 million.
Actually, I guess as I'm grappling with this, I'm just getting that there's also a difference between capital and operational expenditure. Because we've got, with these, like, listing of the amount of the infrastructure, there's an implied renewals cost there, but depending on the expected life of the various, say, culverts or bridges or whatever. But rates, I guess, are for both capital and operational costs, aren't they?
Correct.
But if it's capital, it's a contribution to something that might happen every few years, or they might do 2 bridges a year, or...
Exactly. So it's not necessarily exactly where it sits. And so that's where you get the expenditure might have a different change every year. But rather than trying to use expenditure, using meterage gives us a bit more of an understanding of where that spend happens. So what we're actually looking at, we're trying to look at is a 3-year spend cycle. So you can imagine that's not a short process to try and get that together. But so the meterage is probably a good estimation of what that might look like. And in any one year, it might have a slightly different swing, but the percentage of rural versus urban roading doesn't really change. So that's why I've used that as a starting point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got questions from councillor Larson, followed by councillor Nair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah. Would it be reasonable to say that most of our towns are rural service centres, apart from Mangawhai to some extent?
Correct.
And so is there not a relationship between the survival of our rural towns and the primary production industry that surrounds them?
That's a choice for councillors to make.
Well, but is that not, do they not exist because of the surrounding rural primary production?
So that's a choice for councillors to make when they look at the differentials.
It's not a choice for us to make from an economic perspective.
So sorry, What I'm trying to say is that's a judgment call that as a consultant, it's not mine to make.
I'm not asking you to make it, I'm asking the matter of fact.
So then if you think it's fact, then
Or do you not think it's fact?
when it comes to differentials, that's a choice of council. So
Asking you about differentials, I asked you, do the urban areas rely on the rural areas for their survival? Because they are service towns for the rural area.
I would agree.
Yeah, I'd just say through the chair. So what Bronda's done is looked on the actual facts that she can grab to look at how she can differentiate between the costs of whether she puts more of a differential on rural or residential. But if later on, when you look at what she's done and you want to change it because you want to make things more affordable to the elderly, or you want to recognise that the urban towns are there because of the rural areas, you can then make adjustments because of that. But she's primarily trying to use the facts that she has at her to hand, rather than make those judgments. It's up to you.
Oh, it's not a judgment. I'm sorry, but with respect, it's not a judgment. It's basic economics.
Okay, yeah, but we have to make a decision about to what extent we take that into account.
Correct.
You do, but if the starting point is agreeing, it's a fact that the
Interrelationship.
areas rely on the rural areas for their survival. They are there for that purpose. I don't know why we have to be so precious around accepting that or not accepting it.
So sorry, it's not
It's not be yours, but you're employed by the council to give us advice, and I'm asking you, do you agree with that?
for you to make a decision. Sorry, I'm being a little careful here because this is, it comes back to the choice of council. And I think for any rural area in New Zealand, there is such a symbiotic process between town and country that you can't split them very easily. So, so from that understanding as a generality, yes, I agree with you. That's correct. How much you think as a council that interaction creates a change in the differentials is for you to decide, not for me. So what I'm doing is I'm giving you the information, and as we work through it, I can show you what I've done, and then ultimately council can decide, no, that has too much of an impact on either the rural community or the urban community, and the overall impact is too much and we want to make a change to the way that differential works.
I agree with you on that point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, as my fellow councillors mentioned, I actually have genuine concern in terms of how it is presented. So the allocation is not based on how it is being spent on rural and how much it is being spent on residential, because there'll be disparities, as someone mentioned, in terms of kilometers. So what I'm trying to see, this presentation is not suggesting that because we are spending 5 times more on rural, we should penalize them with a higher differential. That's my question. Thank you.
And that's one of the reasons why I've asked for getting the information around how much spend there has been on the rural versus urban roads over the last 3 years, taking out the Cyclone Gabrielle expenditure. At the moment, I'm still waiting for that. And as soon as I've got that, we'll provide that as a change in the amount that we've talked about. I've tried to take an understanding that there's probably going to be more spent in urban roads than there is in rural, but until I get those calculations, unfortunately, I'm not able to answer it. So I have asked for that and followed it up, but as soon as we get that, we'll provide it.
Thank you.
And we do have another opportunity to once again look at the numbers on the 30th of April, which is hence me needing, a couple of steps at this, because it's not an easier thing to make changes to differentials and then decide what they look like and what the impact is. It's a bit of an iterative process.
Can I ask a question I just want to get some clarity on categories. Differentiate a small lifestyle block from, say, a larger lifestyle block. Where's the definition through there?
2 hectares.
2 hectares, that's what you use, okay.
So the 2 hectare is anything under 2 hectares is deemed to be a small lifestyle block and stays primarily with residential. They tend, from information that I've had from Sue, they tend to be around the outsides of the towns. Anything larger than that is deemed to be a larger lifestyle block, as you've defined at the moment.
Right.
So that's previous council's definition.
Okay, so in this options to generate differentials, you've got lifestyle there, but they're both.
That's both. At the moment, they're in both. They sit in, so because some of them are, because when we look at the lifestyle, we look at lifestyle overall, and the small lifestyle blocks will be the same as residential, and the larger lifestyle blocks will be the same as rural at the moment.
Yeah, in other, who's in other?
So that's everyone. So can I finish what I'm going through and we'll get to that?
Quite a few in there.
Yes, yeah, there is. So if you let me come through to the next bit. So this is where we've got to, based on the information that we talked about last time, which was looking at possibly splitting out the roading rate from the general rate and consider a range of differentials for those rates. Leaving the general rate, including the rate, and then once again have a look at a range of differentials and where they sit. So, so at the moment I've presented the general rate with the other of 1.55, commercial and industrial of 1.1, and residential and small lifestyle of 1. So when I say other in there, at the moment that would include industrial, utilities, transport, community, rural and large lifestyle. Residential and small lifestyle is in residential, and commercial and industrial is in commercial industrial. So other, when I say other, is basically everything else that's not already in a specific block. And that's why I gave you this table this morning, because I thought it was, after talking to Sue, was not as obvious as to which was sitting in where. So this breakdown gives you where they sit in each of the different splits. Now, this is something that council can also consider as to whether we need to redefine which sits in which block and which differentials apply to each one, considering where they sit and what the outcomes are. Following on from last time also, there was a consideration around rural sitting a higher amount with the general rate, because previously at 1.55 it pushed too much into commercial and industrial and residential. So I raised that to 2, as was recommended last time. Everything else fits into the other, which is 1.1, and residential is 1. So residential small lifestyle, you can see that I've got there as 1. Rural and some of the lifestyle blocks are 1.55. And then, sorry, I've got that not quite right when I ran that up this morning, is everything else is 1.1 is other. I did this very quickly this morning when I got in. And then, which is, sorry, that's in the blue, in the purple column, that's correct.
Yeah, so now you got a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick one. In all these scenarios, we haven't been presented with where rural is 1.1. The rural is going at a very high rate, 2 or 4. And I'm just wondering, why did not we look at having 1.1 for rural, 1 for residential, and then split whether we want to go higher on commercial at 1.55 or whatever it is. So that scenario has not been presented. I don't know why.
So sorry, Sue, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll answer that. So through the first lot of consultation, we got a lot of feedback, and that was when the rural was 1.5 and residential was 1. The residential people's feedback that it was too much of a burden on them to bear more of the general rate, then, because there were quite large swings with that. So, and it was the rural people that were benefiting. So if you wanted to put it back down to 1.1 for rural, they would be far more benefiting, and the residential would be hit really hard. So that isn't what came through the consultation, and that would be contrary to what you wanted to do.
Well, Sue, all I'm trying to say is when it was presented to us with the capital value, the rural are the one who were being benefited by lower valuations because they don't have much improvement. And I think that is the reason we should go for 1.1 to actually balance the proposition. The residential pay 1, they pay slightly more. But if we go for 2 and 4, we are literally penalizing rural. And that I don't understand, so that's why I'm asking. Thank you.
So through the chair, no, we're not doing that. It's the other way around, Councillor Ash. So if it's more likely to be around 2.1, 2.2, that rural, that there's more, that affordability is more balanced, if that's what you're looking for.
Thank you, Sue. I've got questions next from Councillor Larson, followed by Councillor Paniora.
Thank you, Your Worship. The lifestyle category which we've got on this handout here, which refers to the differentials as 1.55 and 1. If we want to maintain some sort of parity in terms of what people are currently paying with what they might be paying if we were to change to CV, I don't see how we can keep lifestyle and small lifestyle and large lifestyle conflated. They need to be set out separate, because we're currently charging 1 for small lifestyle and 1.55 for large lifestyle. So if it's itemised in the database, surely we can have it itemised in the summary.
Yes, sure, that's fine. All I do is put 2 lines in saying
We need that.
lifestyle 1, lifestyle 1.55.
We need that.
And I can definitely do that next time. That's not a problem.
And I mean small lifestyle and
Yes,
large lifestyle.
absolutely.
Okay, Councillor Paniora. Can't hear you. I think you're muted. I can't hear you, Councillor. Maybe it's the issue our end or the other?
Me now.
Yeah, now we can. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question that I have is, are these differentials that you've put on this slideshow, are they reflected in the later slideshow that we're going to see with the different percentages between what they are now and what they'll be? Is it based on these differentials or?
Correct.
Okay. So the second question that I have is, because when you look at what this ends up, how it ends up adjusting all of the properties by, what I noticed was that commercial and residential all slightly increase, and then the only one that benefits based on these differentials is rural. So a lot of the conversation that we've heard this morning just isn't the case. They're already benefiting from these differentials, from what I could see of my understanding and interpretation of the next slides is right. I guess the comment that I want to say about this is that this is part of a bigger raft of changes that we have introduced. We've introduced targeted rates. So when we compare residential to rural, it looks really stark, you know, the differential, the 4-1 differential, but we've got targeted rates in there. We're looking at targeted rates for the swimming pools. We're looking at potentially targeted museum rates. We've got all of the connections. We've got the wastewater, the local waters done well connections that are going to come into play. And then we've also got Taumata Arowai as well, that I think is going to be unfair, because it's going to levy the users that are already on the connection or the general rate, and then not, but then taumata are otherwise going to be there to police or to have a look at those, you know, marae and all of those other suppliers of water to police and regulate them at the cost and the burden to our ratepayers. So what I'm saying is we're just looking at this and it's looking unfair, but in reality, the residential ratepayers are going to get absolutely pummeled with a raft of all of the other changes that are going to be affecting them. And I think that the roading rate is good to split off, because when we look at those figures, that 12 million versus the 2.5 million, there's got to be a larger differential there. I hear what you're saying. Apologies, it's my dog. I hear what you're saying around that our local economy relies on the farmers, but these are things that are these principles that we're going to start bringing into our calculations, because those are subjective. I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying that that's a fact. I think that that's a general sweeping statement, but I can think of a number of different industries that we have here. We have a heavy education, we have housing, we have health, we have unemployment, we have a whole raft of other things that don't depend for their survival on in the rural sector. So I don't agree entirely with that. It's not going to be fair, but I think that the principle has to be that we've got to look at who's paying for what and who bears the burden of those costs. So who bears the burden of the 12 million versus the 2 million for roading? Is it our residential that have to pick up the slack yet again? And I've said this comment before, the reverse is true. We here in the local residential properties are paying for most of the services that the farmers come in and use, the supermarkets, the libraries, the parks, or, you know, all of that. So the reverse can definitely be true. I think that we're going to start getting ourselves tangled up in a whole lot of trying to exclude this, exclude that, change to the point where why are we even changing anything? I would then say, well, let's not change anything. Let's just keep it as is. It's we're in a different sort of community. We have east and west completely different. We all have our share of farming communities and lifestyle, and we might find a push back to the old system from all of, just because we're one of the only councils that's not on this other system doesn't mean that it's potentially not right for other councils anymore, and they might come back to that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next slide anyway to get into the details. Thank you.
Do you have a comment to make?
I've got a
Councillor Vincent?
not exactly following on from that, but I'm just wondering what the implications would be, and particularly with this rural urban split. Could a roading targeted rate be set on land value and the rest of the rates on a capital value?
Yes.
And I'm just not too sure what benefit that might be, whether that would make the change more relatable, more consistent perhaps.
So that's entirely up to council to decide whether they'd like to see that or not.
Yeah, I'm actually talking without having thought about it, but I just wonder if it's what the implications might be of doing that, what impact it would have on the
It would do. There is a general shift back to rural with land values, and then that once again comes back to what you would do with the differential to see where that lies.
So there could be still within that range winners and losers, even within the rural sector.
Correct.
Because some might be more capital intensive than others.
Correct.
Whereas if it was still on land value, it might be easier to make the differential perhaps so that it's for each individual property that the change is more relatable. I don't know.
So through the chair, the council have asked us to look at capital value rather than the land value. And that's a big change to go back to.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that is still an option, to leave the largest portion of the general rate on land value, and set a different differential for roading. That's an option of council.
It just makes the thing that much more complicated though, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's complicated, confusing.
Yes. Look, there are councils around New Zealand that have left roading on land value. Once again, it comes back to council. And I think really if you go to capital value, use the differentials to make that change. But you're correct. If you've got two farms side by side and they have the same land value, but one's has more improvements, then they will end up paying more than the person next door, purely because of the improvements on the land. Now, is that reasonable? That's a choice of council.
Well, yeah, it could be that that's other more expensive property is used more intensively and they'll use the roading network more, maybe.
Councillor Lamb?
And that just segues into the next question I was going to ask you. The capital value, how is that determined? Is it solely on structures?
We've done this conversation before. Yeah, I am not a valuation expert. If you're wanting to get into a valuation discussion, then I'd suggest we bring some valuers in. The valuation and the way that it works for commercial and industrial and pastoral land is different than residential. So purely from our point of view, it is the land value or the capital value that's attributed to that as part of the marketing process, as part of the valuation process is what we consider as part of the valuation.
That's why I asked that, and I'll go through and have a look at the pastoral dairy properties and forestry properties, for example, in the spreadsheet that you've given us. And we're talking about two properties right beside each other. One has better quality pasture. Is that valued, or is it only valued on the cow shed and the houses that are on the property? Because what's been put into that has a heck of a lot to do with its productivity. Then when I go through and I have a look at the forestry things, and we'll just take the last one, for example. There's an example property there of $5.4 million, and yet the capital value is 6.5. So they've only added $1.1 million for all those trees. It's worth more than that. Do you understand what I mean? So I'm just wondering where we're coming to with a lot of these and the complications, or are we just going on what we have in the building file and the actual structures on properties?
So once again, that's not our responsibility. We employ valuers to make those valuations on behalf.
So through Mr. Mayor, the valuation, I mean, they follow a rigorous process in their valuation, as you well know, and there's a possibility for owners to go back and challenge their determination. So in some ways, it's not a red herring, but it is outside of this process, because either way, there's land value versus capital value, and there's a process that the residents involved have to play with.
I think trees are a bit difficult for valuers because, you know, the question is, are they operational or are they capital? Like, is it a crop?
Yeah, Christine.
Christine, you've got something to add there. Thank you.
Sorry, my understanding is that the forestry trees are not actually valued as part of the capital value, just if that helps.
No.
But I'm going to reiterate what the CE mentioned, which is that that is actually outside of the gambit of this process. We have at a point in time a capital value and a land value for each property that's ascertained by the valuers based on their process. we take those and use those as part of the value, as part of the rating process. So whether a piece of land beside each other has more inputs or export or outputs is really, that's a bit of a, as I've said before, rating is a bit of a blunt tool. And we can't get down to the nuances of every single property.
As a supplementary to that, if we have a look at the forestry, for example, why is the CV higher than that land value for not valuing the trees? Because there's nothing else here.
Roads.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't answer that question. I'm
Okay. Thank you.
I get myself in trouble.
I know.
Don't know the answer to.
Okay, councillor Paniori, you have a question?
Yeah, just following on from that, I actually think it is really relevant because we're trying to determine what the principles are and what we're going to be to be comfortable and happy with. And we need to understand the direct effects when we can use examples from our districts that are, playing a role in why we're doing what we're doing. So if we can understand these examples that are on the table, then we can understand the effects that the principles that we're trying to apply are going to have. I think that scenario about the two different properties and then the forestry are really important because we need to understand what the effect is on our decisions that we make. That's what we're all here around the table to do today, is to tease out what effect on our ratepayers that these decisions are going to have. So yeah, I mean, can we not laugh it off and can we just try and get some answers? Because I'm really one further point. The spreadsheet that we've got later on in the PowerPoint, it's great as an overall because it shows the trend of the changes that we're trying to make, which was really clear to me what the effect of that is. But when we delve into the slice of the pie and where that slice of the pie shifts within each slice of the pie, who bears more of the burden? Now that's missing from this presentation this morning, and hopefully we'll get some of the answers throughout we've got 45 minutes, but I'm really more interested in that as well. Thank you.
I think we're going to have more of that information laid on the table as we go. Councillor Rachel Wood.
Okay. I guess just following on from what Councillor Paniora has touched on with the principles and all of that, and understanding that and our reasons going forward, I think that the two big principles for me are the ability to pay and the benefits received. It's that's trying to be as fair as you possibly can whilst using the tools. Because
so can I? There's a couple of things. One is fair is something that you don't get in tax. That's probably appropriate. Is the best word to use. It's like I said before, it's a pretty blunt tool. We don't have the understanding like the government does to know what income people are earning who are in the house or on the land. So capital value and land value, or the value of the property, is the closest we can get. The ability to put benefit on it for general rates, it normally becomes general because that benefit ability to ascertain exactly who gets it is less known, other than like water or wastewater, where primarily it's about the connection and that connection gives a service. So you end up with that money, the rating for those services being in general rates, and using the land value or capital value to spread that load is the process that's used for that. Now what we've done and suggested is possibly roading might be slightly different, in that there might be more of a, there's a wider rural community, there's a wider rural roading network. Do they gain more benefit out of that than urban? That's a choice of council to make, which is also why we went away and did that split. But the benefit aspect of general rates is something that's the benefit is less known than it would be in any other of rating. So that's and that's why when we go back and if we have a look at this, and we've looked at the other 50% of where the benefits lie, that's across the whole community. Because it's deemed to be a general benefit to the whole community, which is why it's in general rates in the first instance. And we have already targeted some of those aspects already, so. So this is the breakdown, and I know this is possibly not as easy to see, but it definitely is in the slides that you were sent out, which shows you overall where the winners and losers are. So this is the understanding of the of where those changes happen and which percentages. So this is the breakdown that was requested. And I've looked at this from and across the board. As you can see with the, sorry, I can't see it very well on this screen because it's not very big on my screen, but with the general rate as it stood previously, which we showed, which is the general rate of 1.55 for other and 1 for residential and small lifestyle. It has a bit more of a swing towards the upper end, and I'll show you in that in a minute. There's a couple of big, what I call people who gain the most benefit out of that, moving from land value to capital value. They are primarily some really big urban subdividable options where there is quite a large land value in town, but there's nothing being built on it yet. And there's one particular urban property that's getting the biggest swing in that place. They are paying quite a bit of rates at the moment. And then the other end, when you see some of those other bigger ones at the other end, that's primarily the commercial properties that we've wanted to hit, where they are paying very little amount at the moment on land value, but get to a higher end on capital value.
Please don't tell me those are both the oval ones, the big ones.
They are,
Yeah.
no, they're spread across the community.
I see an example you give it here as big, the large industrial property and a large commercial property in Darwin has got a 180, 150% rate rise. So I just,
Yes.
I'm just fearful of how that's going to encourage more industry. But
And the total rates for the year of $7,000 and $1,000. So one of them's gone down 23% to 1,800 and the other one's gone up 178% and it's still only 7,800.
no, I was looking different. I was looking at 2.8 up to 8,000, and then the other one is going from 12,000 a year up to 32,000. But yeah,
The capital value of 5.6 million and they're going to be paying $8,000.
yeah. It's just because the land value is so low in that area compared to the industry that's operating on it. Whereas when you compare that to over this side, the land value is pretty high.
Yeah.
Compared to the
Yeah.
industry that's on it. So
And possibly,
dynamics are in play.
so the one thing that Christine and we went through and had a look at the lifestyle blocks today and have adjusted those, because what we realised when we've gone from land value or capital value, the lower, median and upper quartile have changed. And we probably need to do a bit more of a review across the board for the rest of the properties as well. We did do a bit of that last time, but possibly not as thoroughly as we could have. So we're going to go through before we come back next time and present those, even if it's is to go through and maybe give you a bit more of a range, and also making sure we are hitting that lower, median, upper quartile for each of those different areas.
Councillor Howard, do you have a question?
Yeah, oh, hold on, I'm unmuted. Yes, just a quick observation really out of this. At the end of the day, with all the give and take that we've gone through, doesn't this slide just simply present the case that this is unacceptable because of the large vagaries of movement to either end of the scale?
The bit I'd probably say is there's a subjective decision in some of those places, because ultimately, and I'll take the large urban block that hasn't been subdivided and hasn't had anything on it at the moment, and that's not in this list, but that is paying quite a large portion of rates on land value, but there is nothing on it, so that they don't get, there's no one to benefit from the services that are provided in the general rate that's on that piece of block. So the fact that it's got a big swing from a subjective point of view of council, is that appropriate or not, is a decision of council. So there will always be some vagaries on the outside because of the change in land value and commercial value and the ratio that has. That's got a ratio of 1. There is no there's no improvements on that land whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's the one that's at the bottom that has the biggest move. And that's, so from a council's point of view, and this may be where we, there might be the understandings of those people at the either ends and why are they moving will be something that we could possibly bring to the group next time. And understanding what the differences are in that space will put them to be able to provide that understanding of where they sit. But primarily that's, like I said, it's in those ones where there is a really significant difference with them going from land value to capital value.
Okay.
And through the chair, what I'll just point out is with the commercial, the large swings to some of the commercial, that was because in the very beginning, council were concerned that we had a lot of large investment on some newer commercial properties, and even some of the large existing commercial properties that basically were only being taxed or rated on their land value. And that was what council said as one of their principles, and they wanted to look at.
And that if I flip through to the other, which is the one that's got the commercial, industrial, etc., you can see that in these numbers is that there are some of the larger properties that are getting a bigger increase, and that increase is primarily because they have a large ratio of land value to capital value, so they've got a big improvement factor on their land. And in commercial properties, that normally means a higher revenue. I know that's a big generalisation, but ultimately that was one of the principles that the council set down, was that there are some large commercial properties that aren't really paying rates appropriate for the level of benefit that they receive from the community.
Right. Councillor Lem.
Yeah, so just on that, we have a multi-million dollar commercial property on $100,000 land value. There's something awry with the valuations there, surely. That land should not be valued that cheaply if it's got a
But it is.
commercial property, Darwell,
That's what it is.
Yeah, so in effect, that land value should be coming up with that commercial development on top of it, the fear that I have, I've mentioned it before, I think, is a discouragement of industrial and commercial properties in one particular area in the district. If that goes up, I know it's going to level things up. My biggest fear with this whole thing is that we have intelligent people who have planned their life and they've budgeted for their life, and rates would have been a big factor in that. And we've got to be very, very careful that we don't upset the balance on what they've planned for. Default. You know, they, yeah, so that's one thing we must consider. If we have a massive increase in a person's yearly bill to live on that land when they've planned for, they've seen what the rates are, they've budgeted for it, they've adapted their lifestyle, especially in their later years, to change it dramatically. Got to be very careful and conscious of that, because they do not have the ability to change and modify. The only option is for them to sell up and move out.
Through you, Mr Mayor, if I could, Councillor Lambeth, so, you know, evaluation, we've addressed that, so we won't go back to the evaluation again. That is subject to a process. And I just reflect that, you know, we've gone through a significant process already, including consultation. Council has decided that we relook at this and reconsult possibly with the community. I take your point, however, you know, we're enacting what council decided. And at the point after the last consultation, if there was going to be no change, then you would have voted it down and stuck with status quo. Council did not do that. Council suggested we go back and revisit, and we're doing that, and that's the process we're in. And I agree with you, that's one of the outcomes that could apply, but we are doing what you've asked.
And if,
Oh, sorry, I wasn't being critical.
No.
I was just just highlighting that point that we are, yeah.
yeah, and please, I'm putting my devil's advocate hat on here. So this is not something that I necessarily believe in or not, but I'm taking it from the other side, if I may. So someone's bought a house, it's got and we'd had this conversation last time around, it's got a large value, and they've been there. There's options for, like you said, sell up and move on, or do a, I want to say retro mortgage, is that the right word? Is that the right term? Yes, reverse mortgage. Look, I'm playing devil's advocate, so there's an understanding that there is a wealth and the principles that the council had agreed that there is a wealth, has somewhat of a understanding that we can ascertain as to the ability to pay. So, and I'll put my other hat on and say that there's someone who's living in a $300,000 house could be in exactly the same position and is struggling just as, or will struggle in the same vein. So that once again comes back to council as council's choice as to where they think the appropriateness of the processes to lie. And that's not our decision, that's yours.
Oh, look, I fully agree with you. What my point is that we're changing rules of the game halfway through the game for some of these people. And we've got to be careful of that.
Yeah.
We've got to make sure that, yeah.
So
be aware of it.
Could I just make a point to that though? You could look at it the other way. And the thing is, when I look at the supermarkets, the large commercial, you've got, you know, Monteroto and all of those places, they have got a lot of trucks on the roads. So I'm just saying, you know, they're paying a smaller amount of rates at the moment. But is that right as well? So, I mean, yeah, we have to get a balance. I totally hear what you're saying. There are a lot of things to consider, but that is on commercial as well, the road use. So I'm just, you know.
After a period of 5-6 years down the track, then people will be purchasing according to their budgets. But at present, we're going to be changing things now.
So, yeah, and the bit I suppose probably ultimately is at which point then is it the correct timing for council to make that decision? Because it will be at a different time for everyone. So you either don't make a change at all, as the CEO mentioned it earlier, and we lay this on the table and we stop and we walk away, or we consider where we're at and continue that process and ask that question.
Okay, I'm just, got one question here from Councillor Nair, followed by Councillor Howard, and then we'll have a 5-minute break. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a comment based on the discussion. Councillor Williams made a point about benefits received and ability to pay. So ability to pay, I agree with what has been presented is none of our business. But what is our business is benefits received versus the critical mass. The critical mass is the residential property owners in Kaipara, whether it's Mangawhai or Dagawet. And that's the major mass which will be affected by any model, whether you are going 1.1 or whatever. So that mass should not be affected because the benefits received are minimal. As we all know, we are not giving them good water, we are not giving them a lot of things, and I think that should stay at 1. And then those aberrations which we are talking about and have probably taken more time than we should on commercial property 1 or 2, there will be aberration in any model, and they can be taken care of on one-to-one basis. I'm sure the council has the ability to do that. So that's the only comment I would like to say. It's a healthy discussion, but there is more work to be done as far as the model is concerned. And I would really like to see residential property owners affected at 1.1, not that 2 and 4, because that's, I think, is criminal. Thank you.
Do you want me to go, Mr.
Yep.
Mayor? Thank you. Thank you. Just back to Councillor Lambeth's points, and you know, it is the thing that we're trying to do is get to something that is equitable across the board, but it is equitable based on capital valuations. And we started this whole journey and talking about commercial, industrial, paying relatively little rates, and that there was a gap. So let's not be forgetting where we've come from. And I can't help thinking, if you've got slide 12 up there now, on slide 14, where you've got that mass of, it's this one here, 14 there, where the mass of little change centered in the middle, and relative balance at either end of the scale. Now, on one hand, you could say that is that is a good outcome, but in fact, does it achieve what we set out to do in the beginning? And looking at this process, so I'm just trying to find a scenario that that does look to be pretty much the right formula.
So as a standard, you can see the majority of people don't have very little change in the middle, but those higher CV values are the ones on the on the right. So they are the ones that are the higher commercial properties. They've got a bigger ratio of land value to capital value. They're the ones that are paying more in this scenario. The
so
ones
that's
that are
right.
So that was what council wanted to happen. The larger commercial properties would pay more.
Yep.
So they are paying more. The ones on the left, which are going down, are actually they benefit from this process because they are normally the smaller capital and quite often smaller land values. And they are actually, for all intents and purposes, having a reduction, and they tend to be the smaller commercial or industrial players. So they are, from all intents and purposes, getting a reduction in their rates.
Yeah.
So I think if all of these scenarios that we've shown achieve that balance for commercial and other in that scenario.
Okay, let's just take a 5-minute break and come back. Thank you very much.
Back at 10:40, everybody online?
Okay, let's move on with this. Slide 12. Thank you.
So I'm just if we can hold questions until I've gone through these next two slides, just because then.
Yeah, let's go through them and then.
Yeah. So this is residential and small lifestyle. So I just wanted to, it's just residential. What I wanted to show was last time when we talked about this, which is the dark blue line, it said that there was quite a big swing for residential into rural, from rural into residential. And you can see that because those two big dark blue lines show that. With the move that we've done with bringing rural to 2, that's moved it back again and it's pushed some of it back out into rural. So that's done that as part of that process. The other thing that we've done when I've pulled the roading out completely and put rural in at 4, you can see that that's pushed it even more back out to the rural community. And you can see the inverse of that on the next slide, which if this would change, help. We need to use.
Saviour's coming.
Oh, hang on a second, I do it. Oh, got it. Sorry, I needed to use the mouse now. You can see it does the inverse, where it's gone back the other way. So in this probably has the rural at 2 holds us closer to a bell curve in that space than a 1.55 would have if we left it at that in the CV space. And you can see because that brings the lines from further out and closer to the beginning of that process when we do that. And so it's around coming back to what council then would give me a bit more guidance around what else would they like to see next. So that's where we've got, this is the outcome overall as it sits at the moment. And are we about there with the capital value of rural for 2 and other 1.11? Or would council like to see something else? And what would that other thing be based on the information that we've provided today? Now, I think what might help is a larger sample property selection, because then you get a bit more of an idea of what's happening across the board for those, those upper ends and where they sit. So it's not just a 1, 2, 3. It might be more like a 6 or a 7 or an 8 in each of those areas. And then we can talk through also those other end and liars and what are happening in those spaces and what the percentages are for those big ends at either end and who's in that space. So, because the one thing I would like to point out is the time frame. The next placeholder briefing, which has been booked in for the 30th of April, is probably the one where I need the direction to redraft the policy. And if we don't hit that date, then we've pretty much all going to have to leave it.
Council meeting day, eh?
It is. So we got the council meeting first, right? And it's in Tangataroria at 10 o'clock, and then post the conclusion of the council meeting, there's an additional briefing scheduled for this.
Right.
Tangataroria, your favourite place, Bonda?
The one that I can't say.
So, any questions?
I'm sorry, I'll reiterate. Happy to provide any information that you need to help you make the decisions. Just need to know what that is so that I can work on that to bring that back next time with the intention of trying to get it out to you before the actual meeting.
So when you said about a broader range of properties,
Sample properties, yeah.
you can get that to us.
Well, it depends on, so there's two things. One, do I need to do some more modelling? Is there something else people would like to see? That's, now that I've got it, the model space there, it's easier to do because I'm not creating new rates and doing a whole pile of additions to the process. But the bit then is, yes, the sample properties are relatively easy to pull out once we've decided, you know, that's what it is and this is what we want to see.
And so you said before about the higher end.
Yes, yeah. And what I'll do is I'll bring, you know, in like when you see these rural lifestyles, those ones that are the sort of outer edges of those, have a conversation about what sort of property that is and what, you know, what their ratio might be and what that looks like, to be able to give you an understanding of who's being impacted at that bigger end of the scale.
Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Bronda. Just, I want to clarify one thing you say there. You want to see who's impacted the most. Now, we're talking about sample capital value properties. We're not talking about specific properties that others might know or anybody might know about, aren't we?
Correct. So we would pull out a number of sample properties that it's not, we're not picking on people, but what we do want to do,
A range.
yes, so to giving you a good range, but then also giving you a bit of a story without naming names of the people that are at either ends, so you can see what those big impacts are and why there's been such a big change in that space.
Well, hopefully so that we would see the effect at different levels of CV throughout the community.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, this still comes back. The area I have some disconcert about is that there is still subjectivity in this. And I don't think, you know, you can just track by your models here that you can get pretty close, but you can't. We may still be able to get precise, but we're trying to be fair and equitable. We want to still attract people to come here, and that they have some fair evaluation of what their rates are going to be and where they can see where they're going to go. So they're the key things for me, I think. So by all means, if that's the right way, by highlighting the higher value properties, because ultimately that's where the income comes, the real income comes for us. That's good.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Councillor Vincent.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm wondering, like, where I'm seeing things have got to is we're getting down to a difficult place to be in. And I thought part of this deal, at least what we were hoping to achieve, was for industrial and commercial properties to pay their fair share, or an appropriate share, say. And is there the potential for us to introduce capital value rating in stages, and the first stage being to set rates for commercial and industrial used property? I would go back to slide number 6, how the land is used. Strike a rate that is more appropriate based on the capital value of those properties, and the effect would be, if they're paying more, then everyone else would pay a little bit less if everything else stayed the same. Is that other proposition? I don't know what interest there would be in pursuing it, because that's obviously just more rework on what you've already done. But I have to raise that.
Yes, so if you can't split it being land value and capital value mixed for the general rate, it has to be either capital or land value. So if what you wanted to do is leave everyone else alone, then we would need to go back to land value and look at what you do for a differential based on what's sitting there now to do that.
Differential rather than a targeted rate?
Well, at the moment, what would you target?
Land that's used for commercial and industrial purposes.
But that wouldn't be a targeted rate. You target the rate based on the service that's provided. So if that service that's provided, you want to pull out of the general rate and target that purely to commercial, you can do that, but it would need to be then targeted across the rest of the community. So you can't, so the only way that you could do that is by applying a differential while still leaving it on land value.
Right. And a differential probably wouldn't, it would have to be very high, wouldn't it?
Well, I haven't even looked at those numbers to understand what that would do.
Yeah.
Sorry, I haven't. We've done it purely going to capital value.
Yeah,
There was the two principles was going to capital value because it gave you more of an understanding of wealth providing being based on full value of the property, not just on the land value. And commercial and industrial was also part of that as the principles that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting, reading the room, so to speak, and the screen, is that that there's a loss of appetite for change. And should we just pull the pin now and save everybody a lot of time and hassle? Like, I'm interested to pursue the proposal, but I'm just saying, well, we seem to be getting ourselves bogged down in detail of how individual properties are affected rather than keep our vision up to what the principles are, what we're trying to achieve. So that's just some feedback.
Councillor Paniora.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree with Councillor Vincent's sentiments. I
realise this is being recorded.
Pardon?
It's being recorded.
I just have to cast my mind back to why we started this whole thing in the first place. I was absolutely against moving to this this new system, and then I was, I was given examples around some of our larger industries that aren't paying, that are paying in some instances less than our ratepayers, but their values are in the millions. So I started to come around to the idea of maybe, there was a more fair and equitable process. But what I've seen today is us trying to fiddle with the differentials to try and make the principles work, and nothing that we've done, even going back to some of the principles of Councillor Williamson, one, the ability to pay, and two, benefits received, is difficult to even put into practice with some of the figures that we've received, and talk about, how are they going to pay? Oh, well, maybe they can do a reverse mortgage. Who are we to put these sorts of, and I know it was in the vein of devil's advocate, but who are we to start to play with people's futures and their financial circumstances, and then why are we doing that? What are we to gain from that? The only way that I can see this working is if we do look at a differential, but how a differential for the industrial commercial, but how would that differential work if we still want our little industrial operators to pay lesser of the share of what the larger ones should be paying if we're applying a differential? Like, does that differential apply across the board, or is there a way to make sure that we're pushing more of that share of rates towards the larger operators and lesser. I don't I don't feel comfortable at all. Like, as it stands, I'm going to vote against moving, and I mean, not that anything that my vote usually counts, but I just do want to make it clear I'm not for this exercise in its current, where it's currently sitting at. And the more that we play around with the numbers, the more we're going to have ratepayers that are up in arms. We've had the subdivision up here that's smashed some of our ratepayers because of the subdividable nature of the now value of the property. And so how does what benefit? So if we go back to that principle of the ability to pay and the benefits received, so what benefit did we give to that 150% increase? What benefit did we, are we providing them? Are we giving them extra pipes? Are we giving them a new road? What are we giving that ratepayer for them to, for us to justify such a substantial, eye-watering increase to their rates? And that's just one example. There will be many examples when we move through to this new system that we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be extremely upset with this exercise. And just leaving it on the final note, to what benefit?
Thank you, Councillor Howard, followed by Councillor Nair. You're on mute, Mike.
You're on mute, Mike.
There we go. I'm some interesting observations here, and I wonder. When we first talked about this, we talked about the huge majority of councils that were doing this process. I wonder whether we have, now we've gone through all this, on reflection, the number of industrial and larger commercial entities in the district to make a tangible difference. Now, does it come back to the numbers that we have available? Certainly on some of the districts that the councils that I know that are doing this, they've got all sorts of other evaluation criteria. But they've got a strong commercial and industrial base behind them also. So look, it just adds more questions, I know. I don't really want to give up on this if this actually does provide the equity that we talked about in going for it. And I think we've got to really go through as far as we can yet with it. There would be a lot of people that would be disappointed if we didn't do it. So we're in the balance at the moment, but I think that question about the volume of commercial and industrial, do we have enough to really make a difference?
Thank you, Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I kind of agree with the fellow councillor, Mr. Howard, in terms of the number of commercial property and industrial property are minuscule in our district compared to so many other councils. And I think the fairness, the principle of fairness is very important rather than the ability to pay. And the principle of fairness will not be affected with any rating model here if we are using 1.55 or 2 or 4, especially in the rural. So given to me, I would rather leave it to bid, the whole exercise. It's a good exercise, but I think there's more to be done in terms of modeling. And if we just blatantly go ahead and implement something in this short period of time, it will be criminal. It will not be benefiting any section of the community. So I'm also of the thought that looking at a few months left for this term, we should not make any crucial decision on this. And it's a good learning exercise, but it more to be done to make it more fair to everyone in the next year. Thank you.
Okay, councillor Lambert, followed by councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's one of the most difficult things we've had to deal with, I believe, in the last 2.5 years. I've swayed one way, then the other, and then back again and back and forward. Looked at individual property types, from the farming community to the rural lifestyle community, industrial to commercial to residential, even different sides of the district and different areas of the district. It's one of those challenging things where I find is one of the most challenging things we've done. We must if we're going to make the change, we must make it all at once. We can't slowly go in, because that's just going to create more and more problems. As I've mentioned before, my fear is that sudden change, 5 years, 10 years down the track, it's not going to matter as far as I'm concerned, because people will design or choose their properties accordingly to their budgets. I'd like to see some other districts that have changed. When somebody said a majority have done it, I think the words were mentioned that around about 78% of councils are on CV now. And I've always said, you know, with our commercial retail areas full up in the Kaipara, are we doing the right thing by staying with LV, or should we be changing? Whereas other areas in Northland, they've got vacant shops everywhere. So I'm just wondering whether we're on the right formula now, or should we be going to that like those other. However, I'd like to see, and one thing that has come of light was what I believe was a High Court decision for Wairoa and how they deal with forestry, and especially carbon credit farming. I'd like to see how Wairoa change it and maybe have a look at what examples they've got. They're a small district like us, and they changed from LV to CV, and then they won that court case on how they deal with forestry and especially carbon credit farms, and how that's going to affect the district and the ratepayers' ability to fix up those problems later in upcoming years. So I'm going to do a bit of research on that, but I still think we should continue this process. We owe it to the people out there that we robustly do it. There has been criticism that we've put it off, but I've taken that as not to be criticism, but the fact that this is a difficult decision and we've got to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Williams.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I agree with councillor Lambert. I think we need to keep moving forward with this process. And I think, you know, the thing that maybe that we're not balancing out is that there are actually decreases for people as well. And yeah, it's about getting that balance right. But I think even by going through this process, we are gaining a better understanding of rates in our district. So I think it is beneficial to keep going, and yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, I think I've given Mike a say, but anyway, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a little question following on from Councillor Lambert's point, which I think is an interesting one that was published, I think, in the last 2 weeks. Is Gordon saying that we should add another category now rather than just forestry, but carbon credit forestry?
No, sorry. Can I? No, Wairoa District have a levy or something along that line where they add on for carbon credit farming and the problem that it causes the district in the future. And that has been challenged in the High Court, and it has been found to be sound. And that's because they are on CV and not LV.
Yep. I agree with you. Just a matter of, does this put the whole process back? I think it's a valid question that we have. It's just a matter of how could we relatively easily manage it.
Yes, so through the chair, no, we can't. And if you want to do that before the elections, what you've given us, the specification has been to look at the CV, but yeah, and we've come back now with some proposals. We've heard that Councillor Rachel has said that she believes the rural should maybe have a little bit more, wants to make sure because the costs are there. I've heard others that are don't want to go ahead, and yeah, and so I'm just not sure what you want us to do next time, apart from give you more information on the on what we've given you today on the two methodologies, one with roading being separate, or one with just roading being in the general rate and being at 2.
Yeah.
And Councillor Ashes don't, him wanting to have rural at 1 does not agree with the principles, so we've discounted that.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I think I guess where I was coming from is that as you go through, we've gone through a process where we thought what the balance was. We thought that commercial and industrial would have a lot more sway on the overall outcome where it was applied. That apparently doesn't happen. So I still wait for an answer somewhere down the track on my earlier question about do we have the volume there. But I think that the part of the process is the whole process has thrown up this question now about carbon farming. So, you know, maybe it is just something that needs to be added to give us the complete answer. I, for one, want to stay with the process that we've started. But there are some fundamental options, questions that need to be answered yet.
Thank you, Mike. Look, let's wrap it up now. If you want any questions or information, please email it. We've got to make decisions on the 30th. Is that right, CE Maris?
So no, Mr Mayor, so you got another workshop? Last workshop after the council meeting?
Yeah.
Can I just check in with Rhonda first? Are you clear what information's been requested to bring back on the 30th? Because I am really mindful of the timeframes here. As you indicated, that is the last workshop, I understand, before we can then get to decision making and go out to the public with something. I'm not hearing with it yet, actually, but thank you for the conversation about whether to proceed or not. The council decision, we're going to continue through this. Rhonda, can you let us know if you've got enough information here or what you plan on bringing back to give the council comfort here from today?
I suppose the thing that I haven't heard is that you want to see any other different modelling. And that, unless there's something that I haven't heard yet that people want to put on the table. Definitely that there's a request for more information and larger amounts of sample properties, which we can absolutely do. That's probably where I'm sitting at the moment, unless there's someone else who wants to put some other information on the table before we wrap up.
Councillor Larson.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, I've been really clear with the information that I want since February, and I've asked for it multiple times via email and not received an appropriate response. So I'm still waiting on that before I can make a decision.
So we can't use property categories. We can't use property categories because they aren't what we can set the rates on. So what we've done is given you the breakdown based on usage, which is what we can do.
I mean usage.
That is the usage breakdown.
I mean usage. We've got all sorts of, so that's the only way you can break down usage.
That's the summary level. Otherwise, it goes down to about 80 different summaries after that.
You can combine categories into, like you've told us today that you can provide us with a breakdown of the figures for small lifestyle and large lifestyle, if there is such a thing, but on there you only have lifestyle.
That's correct, and I can split that out. So what I can do is get a list of the
that'd be great.
Of the 80 different categories, and
starting point.
And you could summarise, not as a totals, but because otherwise I then have to
just tell me what the categories are, and I will tell you what information I want.
Absolutely. Yep, we can do that.
That we must be talking at cross purposes, because I thought I read
Because
that out.
the information that I was given was the property categories. And the property categories we can't use because they're best or highest use. But if you've got a category, a process that you're wanting to pull those categories together and see subcategories underneath the total, underneath the summaries, we can absolutely do that.
That's what I do want to do.
Okay, I'll send you the list.
Are you able to get anything from Wairua or not?
In what sense?
No,
How
not
that-
the time frame.
Yeah.
We're working to a tight time frame. We're just looking at capital value. Land
So,
value,
and-
capital value.
Yeah, I'll make my own inquiries, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, the other thing is, my understanding is that you had a forestry report a couple of years ago that went through and did a complete review of how forestry,
The LTP.
as part of the LTP, was looked at.
But that was based on LV, not on CV.
But the principles, I suppose, behind how forestry is looked at.
But we don't have a High Court ruling setting a tone for it. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
No, but, yeah, sorry.
targeted rate is based on roading, whereas I think Wairua is based on social and economic impacts.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay, thank you. Let's wrap it up. So any email with information, please send it through.
Out of scope.
Look, I just want to say, it's good that everybody's really concerned, and the common concern is that everyone wants to try and get to a place where we have the best rating system possible, that's the fairest possible, and that's do here, so we need to get our head around it pretty well. Thank you.
And I will agree with Councillor Lambert, this is the hardest decision that councils make, is setting a revenue and finance policy. It is the absolutely hardest decision a council will make.
Thank you. Okay, so
Is the meeting finished?